Saul, do you believe in God?
Is that what it's come to? No, I don't. I accept that this defies all known laws of physics, but I don't think that's an argument for God.
So what's left?
From the same showrunners that brought us hit shows like Game of Thrones and True Blood, as they come together to bring us one of my most anticipated shows this year, and that show has released today, and we are here to discuss this new Netflix epic sci-fi series, which was inspired by the internationally celebrated novel of the same name. We're here to talk about The Three-Body Problem. Now in this video, we'll be breaking down the season 1 finale. And first, let's start the conversation in the comments section. Did you all read the series of books that this is based upon, and what did you think of its adaptation? Now for everyone, including myself, who hasn't read the books, what did you all think about the finale, but also the first season overall? What worked, what didn't work, what were some of your standout moments, standout characters? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now with that said, let's break down and discuss this last episode, which was titled Wall Facer. Full spoilers ahead. We open with Saul, who's still grieving after the loss of Will in the previous episode, as he's watching a discussion on the news talking about the Santi declaring war against humanity. As they talk about how it isn't about the current civilization that can defeat them, but how the descendants can do it, which is one of the main purposes of this finale. As we know, the staircase project with Will's floating head is in full effect. As we watch Saul have a conversation with his one-night stand, as she finds how the aliens perceive the humans as bugs very depressing. A notion that Mike Evans introduced back in episode 4.
I was describing them as pests because, well, that's what they are. Annoying, inconsequential, easy to eliminate. Like bugs you can squash under your shoe.
Now, just before Saul's life is about to be turned upside down, Saul acts as though he can't remember his one-night stand's name. But after what's about to happen next, I bet he'll never forget. As they walk together to find her Uber, Saul explains his position on not necessarily caring about the invasion that's set to happen in 400 years, as he relates it to his ancestors 400 years in the past as how they couldn't imagine where he would be today. Saul tells her that his cynic viewpoint stems from the fact that he will never have kids, so he's not worried about the future. And just as she begins to talk about her wanting a future and wanting a family and kids one day, out of nowhere, in a Final Destination type of moment, Saul gets knocked down by a random guy, causing him to get knocked out of the way of a car crash, which caused another car to drive on the sidewalk to hit the girl and killing her. As he remembers her name is Nora, as we'll learn later that this was a coordinated attack to eliminate Saul. Now Saul is taken in and he officially meets Dache, or Clarence, as we get the clarification that all the events starting back in episode 1 in present day took place over a year. Saul is surprised to learn that Clarence knows about his friends Augie and Jen and the murder of Jack and Will recently passing away. Saul learns that he was brought in to discuss a conversation that was had between him and Dr. Ye at Verna's grave. As he learns that he was the last person to meet with her before she got murdered, something that we didn't see on screen, but we know that was at the hands of Tatiana at the end of episode 7, as it is now believed that someone's trying to murder Saul as well. As he believes it was all an accident, but is told that all 3 car systems were hacked. Now, was this an attempt to kill him because of the conversation he last had with Dr. Ye? As Saul is now under the protection as he's given a bulletproof outfit and guided on board to a private jet to an unknown location. Now, I personally couldn't help but to think taking Saul on this plane was a pretty idiotic idea, because they know that the Santi are capable of their protons that are sent on Earth can hack into any technology anywhere. And not only could they hack into another plane that can crash into them, but they can probably overtake their plane. I could be wrong, but this didn't seem to be the safest method of travel, and it also seemed to be a bit of a plot hole. We cut to Jen storming into Wade's office, demanding that seeds of Will's favorite produce be included in the staircase capsule, as Wade reminds her that every item counts against them on the timing of his arrival, as we see Jen threatens to quit, but Wade calls her bluff. Now this was a scene that felt repetitive, because we saw Jen and Augie threatening to leave, but staying over and over again, and to me it felt forced drama, and seeing characters acting as though they're not dealing with this existential threat, that to me was something that was quite annoying to watch throughout this season. Now back with Saul, he's introduced to a character by the name of Sebastian Kent, who has taken him to the United Nations for a ceremony announcement about their plans for the world, which will be the Wall Facer Project. Now the Wall Facer name comes from the ancient Buddhist name of meditators. We watch the Secretary General talking about humanity still having their secrets and the Santi not having the abilities to read their minds. As 3 people have been chosen for this project, their objective is to make plans entirely in their own minds, sharing them with no one until the time is right. As we meet these wall facers, starting with General Hu Bo-ling, who's a military expert. Next we have Professor Layla, who's an expert at asymmetrical battles. And lastly, we have Saul, as they're tasked with the most difficult and important mission in human history. Now clearly Saul is in disbelief and immediately wants answers to why he was chosen and why he was not told that he was picked, as we see the Secretary General tells him that he's being watched by the enemy and the enemy believes that he's special. Now Saul rejects this offer to be in a wall facer and is granted permission to leave, and he does just that. As he denies any security and walks out of the building, he is immediately shot. Now initially I was under the impression that this was all a setup to make him believe that his life was in danger, forcing him to join, but we'll see later that this was indeed a second attempt to kill him. As he wakes up in the hospital to Clarence apologizing for not keeping him safe, we see Saul wants to meet the shooter. He wants to meet the enemy and talk to him. Now in this scene, we see the shooter shows no emotion or remorse and apologizes for not aiming for his head, as he proceeds to mock Saul's behavior of underestimating the Santee and admits his devotion to them and declares himself as a soldier of the army of their lord. Saul still refuses to take action and accept this 24-hour protection and just wants to go home, as Ken informs him that he still has to be responsible for his day-to-day actions, as Saul requests to sit down with the Secretary General once again. We watch as he tells her that he's never been a part of a war, but more importantly, he doesn't know how to fight aliens, but the question remains, why was he chosen? A question that she can't even answer, as she tells him he'll know this answer when the time is right, as she sends him off with a message.
We're taking a huge gamble on you. I don't expect to live long enough to see whether it pays off, but I pray that it does.
As we watch Jen on board a flight with other key members of the Staircase Project, as we watch her avoid Raj. Now Raj wants to know what happened between him, as he brings up Will, which Jen admits that she is still thinking about him and more importantly thinking about this mission that he's on. Now Raj reminds her that Will is dead, but she refuses to believe this, as she admits to currently still loving him. Now I want to address this now, but the building blocks of this romantic relationship between Will and Jen has been handled terribly. Not only was it rushed into these final 2 episodes, but it was barely a focus on the earlier episodes. We got no flashbacks, no scenes of them spending much time together. Instead, it was mentioned a few times between Will, Jack, and Saul, but not once was Jen questioned about how she felt about Will until now. As we cut to Tatiana, noticing that the door of her mobile home is open, as she finds the Santee virtual reality device is gifted to her with a letter saying, "If one of us survives, we all survive." As she puts it on, and we're not shown what she's seeing or what messages she's getting, but it's safe to assume that she's now replacing Dr. Ye as well as Mike Evans as their main source of communication with humanity. Now at Will's send-off, we see Wade caved in and allow for his favorite produce to be on board with him, changing his mind and showing more of a friendlier side to him to Jen. Now Saul and Jen discuss the ones who love them and them not acknowledging that being Will for her and Augie for him. Which, speaking of, we see Augie's now in Mexico helping the people who are dealing with an epidemic, as she gets a call from Saul and she ignores it. As they watch the ship enter into space, things are going according to plan at first. As we watch the countdown destination ends, the navigation is interrupted as a cable disconnects and the mission is now going off course. As they watch Will's head descend into space, we see Wade whisper something to Jen. We end this finale with seeing Wade on his private jet as he gets a message for Sofan. The Santee were looking forward to meeting Will and still looking forward to meeting him if his hibernation tech works. Now the Santee do admit that Wade is a strong leader and inform him that there will be a place for him when they arrive, as he's a part of their plan. As the virtual reality avatar arrives right in front of him, they remind him that they'll be with him wherever he goes, and they are in control to what he sees into the day that he dies. Our final shot shows Jen talking to Saul about how Will be lost upwards of 5 million years before he leaves the Milky Way, as Clarence joins them and invites them on a drive to get perspective on how the humans will survive this oncoming invasion. He takes them to a swamp covered with bugs. These are the bugs that people hate and have been trying to get rid of forever. They've tried every conceivable way possible to get rid of them, but they don't go away. As we end with him telling them it's time to go back and continue their work, and we see the bugs fly in the air, it being a representation of maybe the humans making it out of this oncoming invasion. To be straightforward and honest, I found this entire finale to be quite anticlimactic and extremely frustrating and disappointing. But let's talk about it and my overall thoughts of the show. Now the first question for me is the situation on why Saul was chosen to be a part of this project. Now if we go all the way back to episode 1 and remembering what Vera told him.
You still demonstrate great potential for future scientific accomplishment.
Miss Mo Window, a person who has not made his great contribution to science before the age of 30 will never do so.
How old are you? 31.
32.
Anyone can figure this out. It's you.
She believed in him and knew a time would come when he would feel like he was reaching his full potential. Now next, we can go back to episode 7 where Dr. Ye told him a very important joke.
She always said you were the smartest one and says, we warned you, never play with God. Humor is a very personal thing. Some people understand it and some people don't. Some jokes are so private, they only make sense to 2 people. Jokes are important. We wouldn't survive without them. I hope my joke doesn't cause you any trouble.
So I believe the Santi took that cryptic message as a way of it being a threat. Remember, even Vernon told her mother that he was the smartest of the group. So it's safe to assume that they wanted him dead because he's key to the future war, even though he didn't want to be a part of it. But this is where some of my main issues with the show start. Saul's importance to the overall plot, Will and Jin's love story, Augie's personal journey, all examples of characters and plot lines that felt extremely rushed or poorly executed and underdeveloped. This episode was a perfect example of how the stakes sometimes felt non-existent or never really having that feeling that the characters were truly in danger. Which, to wrap up this breakdown, I felt the majority of the show had an uneven pace, it was tonally inconsistent, and it felt like it was repetitive and had underdeveloped exposition. I really wish the show would have expanded upon the different viewpoints of the scientific people, like Saul, for example, believing that everything is based in science and has a logical answer versus not believing in God or religion. I wish that discussion was explored with those who called the Santi Lord what drove them people to giving up on humanity. And for a show that had moments of epic scope and scale, besides the news clippings on TV, I never felt the weight of the world and how they felt about the future invasion. Also found it very difficult to accept that the United Nations put the responsibility of defending humanity on one person, and that being Wade. I don't think we saw one scene or any pushback from any other nation or countries or war leaders or governments about the decisions being made on how they can defeat the aliens. Which, speaking of, the menacing nature of the Santi and what they're capable of doing was very inconsistent. How was Tatiana able to vanish in thin air after killing Jack? Now, I assume it had to do with the 2 protons on Earth, but that was never really explained. I also assume that the VR was sent to Earth by those same protons as well. It's little details like that that I wish were explained more in depth. But my biggest complaint about this show is how it struggled to develop its main core of characters with the Oxford Five, and how it really didn't make me feel that their relationships were real and that they really cared for one another. The show didn't do enough legwork for me to convince that they cared about one another, and I didn't really care about them individually at points, nor as a group. I never felt that their chemistry really worked for me, and you have some characters that just fell flat like Augie, or unlikable like Jack, or feeling like they're in a different show like Will. Sometimes their motivations just felt unclear or not fully explored. Which speaks to the genre that the show is handling. It definitely felt more like a smart sci-fi thriller at times, but an uninteresting and underwhelming sci-fi drama. But as a fan of science fiction, I really did appreciate how deep in depth and how heady the science was in this show. Honestly, I have so much more to say, but I want to end it on this. In conclusion, Three Body Problem is a show about science and technology and tries to explore what it means to be a human in today's society, and it does a halfway decent job of exploring that. As the show attempts to put in a mirror to today's world, which is shaped by technology and science, and shows that it can be both empowering to us, but also enslaves us by its influences. And within the context of the show, it threatens humanity. As we watch both the science and technology and what the responsibility means to some of those characters in the show and how it's put to question of what they can do when they have control, for example, characters like Wade, Dr. Ye, and Mike Evans. As we saw through the eyes of the VR, the true nature of reality itself and the vastness of the universe is way more complex than what these characters could have ever imagined. When this show was at its best, this to me was a show that tackled the philosophical sci-fi story that was a genre-bending experience that combined science, technology, humanity, and the scope and scale of all that, but ultimately, it didn't do it effectively. That's going to be the end of this video. I would love for you all to share your thoughts on this finale as well as the overall show, from what worked and didn't work for you, from the story to its characters, and what you all hope to see in potential future seasons. Thank you all so much for watching this video. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.